Right. So the topic of my presentation is Unpacking China's PRI in Myanmar. Is Patience Influence Strong? And before I begin, I want to thank South Indian scholar group of international studies, and specifically MILSA for this platform and this opportunity. So to begin my presentation, it has an underlying assumption, which is that China does have a stronghold in Myanmar, um, and that economically, politically, and strategically. The attempt of my presentation would be to probably, challenge this notion, to test the tenacity of this assumption, and also unpack it to a large extent. So I'll just begin by giving a broad outline of my presentation. I think I'll keep it in this view. Is that fine? Okay.
Up to you, whichever comfortable you can.
Yeah, because I have my notes on the right panel. Okay. So the outline of my presentation is as follows. I'll give a brief history of bilateral relations. Then I'll give like an overview of the framework that I've created of China's approach towards Myanmar and vice versa. An overview of what the Belt and Road Initiative, henceforth I'll call it BRI, entails within Myanmar, and then some concluding remarks. So going forward with my bilateral relations, I'll actually begin at the 15th century. And that's when you'll see that borders between neighbors result in shared cultures, identities, and people-to-people movement. And so is the case with Myanmar and China, where you had the Shans, Kachins, and Shins, who are said to have originated from southwestern China and Yunnan province. And historically, it's been said that parts of China were ruled by Burmese kings and vice versa. Now, the reason why I bring this up and go back all the way to, the 15th century is because to highlight two important factors. The first is that when you do a reading of ancient history of Myanmar and China, it's often said that Myanmar is seen as a vassal state or a tributary state of China. And that is why its modern day dependence on China is traced from a historic period. Now, from the small facts that I've highlighted in the ancient period, where even Burmese kings ruled China, it showcases that it's not the case, that Myanmar was not a vassal state or a tributary state of China, and that corollary distinction that it was always dependent on China can be contested. Now, that's the main reason I bring it up. Now, I'll just fast forward to UNO period, which is from 1948 to 1962. Now, this is when Burma or Myanmar as an independent state was born. And the relations between these two countries during this time can be described as cautious but friendly. Cautious, obviously, because of the fact that, of Myanmar's geostrategic position. In fact, there's a declassified document by the British Foreign Ministry that said that the Burmese government had overestimated the threat of the Chinese Communist Party. And this overestimation resulted that they believed that in 1949, the Chinese would not hesitate to attack Burma. And the document is relevant because it indicates how the threat perception of Myanmar towards China continues even today, from a military standpoint as well. I bring into focus here a quote by UNO, who was the first prime minister of the country, and he said that Myanmar is like a tender gourd that's caught between two cactus, and the two cactus being China and India. And I think this is a very profound quote that continues to reflect how Myanmar is trying to balance its relations between these two giants. However, there was another sticking point between China and Myanmar at this point, and that was mostly because of China's support towards Burmese Communist Party. In 1954, the relations, however, between these two countries did improve. The two states actually call themselves Pokpo. Pokpo means cousins of fraternal brothers. And a lot happened during this time, but I don't want to go into details. However, I do want to highlight the year of 1954. This was the year when the two nations signed a bilateral trade agreement. And in 1960, Myanmar became the first country to sign a treaty of friendship and mutual non-aggression with China. It also was the first country to resolve its border dispute with China. So you could see during this period, Myanmar kind of became like the model for China to develop bilateral relations with in Southeast Asia and South Asia as well. Now, going forward, you have the Ne Win period. It started out friendly. Ne Win was the military dictator of Myanmar. He forcefully took power from UNO's, who was a civilian leader. So during this period, what happened was that the relationship soured mostly because, like I had mentioned, the excesses of the Cultural Revolution in China, which led to the Chinese supporting the Burmese Communist Party, and that did not go down well in Myanmar. And that eventually led to the 1969 anti-China protests. However, a breakthrough did come in 1971 when Lee even visited China. Myanmar further helped China improve its ties with Cambodia in 1977. So that goes on to show that there was a positive move in the relationship. During this time, I want to highlight the 1980s particularly, and this I say is the period where the seeds for the Belt and Road BRI initiative were planted. Now, I'll explain why I'm saying that. The first is that the 1980s became a period when Myanmar was actually seeking support from China and was helping China in, let's say, the United Nations and helping China get more resolutions passed. Today, of course, the tables have turned with Myanmar depending on China for UNSC support because of the Rohingya issue, etc. But in 1980s, China said that its relationship with Myanmar is like a golden bond of friendship. And this was because we know that in the 1980s, China implemented economic reforms under Deng Xiaoping, and that resulted in China kind of interacting heavily with its neighborhood. And that was no different with the case of Myanmar as well. However, an important part was that the geo-economic dimension of why China wanted to improve its relations with Myanmar, and that was to promote the growth of its landlocked province like Guangxi and Yunnan. I'll focus specifically on Yunnan. So Myanmar was seen as a land bridge for China to revive its southwest Silk Route by providing the southwestern provinces an outlet to the coast and thereby into the Indian Ocean. This thinking gained momentum in the mid-1980s with the ideas of using Myanmar as a and specifically its railroads from, let's say, Myitkyina to Lasho as conduits for Chinese goods. And this idea was espoused officially in an article that was written in Beijing Review 1985. And hence, I reiterate that the seeds of the BRI were planted during this period in Myanmar. Then comes the military junta period. This is when there was a complete military takeover within Myanmar. So I'm trying to draw parallels between the domestic politics in Myanmar and how that impacted the bilateral relations with China as well. So during this period, you'll see that the Sino-Burmese relationship was described as an entente, which was the term that was used in World War. And it was driven by Myanmar's need for international recognition. Now, why did Myanmar require this international recognition? There are two main factors that happened. The first was the 888 protests, which happened on 8th August in 1988. That's why it's called 888 protest. And these were pro-democratic protests against the military, and they were quite violent, and they were headed by Aung San Suu Kyi. Following the 888 protests in 1990, there were elections that were held. Of course, the military did not favor the election results because they were in favor of Aung San Suu Kyi and the Democratic Party and went against the military. So the military thwarted those elections and continued to rule. So there was a lot of international condemnation against Myanmar. And at the same time, in 1989, you had China that had faced the Tiananmen Square incident, which was also pro-democratic movement that was squashed by the regime. So these two incidents kind of ran parallel and during the same time. And this international isolation actually led Myanmar and China to come closer together and foster better relations. Myanmar, of course, did not have as many options as China, which sought Russia, etc. So what I meant to say is that during this period, you saw a cementing of relationship between both these countries. However, by the 2000s, Myanmar realized its over-reliance on China and was quite uneasy of it, and hence it tried to look for other options. And it looked for other options in ASEAN, in Japan, in Russia, and even India. It joined ASEAN in 1997. So during the early 2000s, you saw that Myanmar was hence pushing out for other options and overcome this over-reliance that it has had on China all these years. Now, keeping all these historical facts in mind, I want to move towards my three-level analysis. If you see this slide carefully, you will see that the factors of history, geography, and politics run throughout the framework. History is what I just elucidated in the bilateral relations between Myanmar and China. Geography is quite self-explanatory in terms of Myanmar's geostrategic position, where it oscillates between being part of Southeast Asia and South Asia. Politics, I will define as the interactions between the actors that I've outlined at each of these levels and the motivations that these actors have. So I'll just quickly go through this. So at the interstate level, I've identified four major actors, and these are the Tatmadaw. Tatmadaw is called the Myanmar's military. The second is the NLD government, the National League of Democracy, that is headed by Aung San Suu Kyi. in Myanmar. And then you have the CPC, which is the Communist Party of China, and the PLA, which is the People's Liberation Army of China. These are the four main players who have the interstate level interaction. So largely the historical ties that I've described is based on what these four actors have done with each other. At the interstate level, you have the addition of two other actors, and these kind of change how the dynamics between the country works. Who are these two actors? That is ethnic armed groups who operate at the periphery of Myanmar and are currently at war with the central government of Myanmar. And the other is the Yunnan provincial government at the Chinese end. Now, here I'd like to highlight a dual policy approach that's followed by China towards Myanmar. What do I mean by that? When I say dual policy, I mean sometimes Beijing has its own sets of strategic interests and policies which run contrary to what Yunnan, its provincial government, wants. Now, these fissures can be mostly observed in, let's say, logging issues of logging and timber, where Yunnan government wants to put a certain price and take money from Myanmar, but Beijing wants another price. So these are at the economic level. However, at the conflict, at the armed conflict level, you have the ethnic armed groups that take money and weapons from the Yunnan government, which Beijing does not want and wants to give it to another other armed group. So there's a duplicity or a dual policy that is coming out of China. One is coming from Beijing and the other is coming from Yunnan government. And what has this done? This has created a level of mistrust at different levels in Myanmar, at the interstate level, at the intrastate level, and the micro level. Now, at the micro level, how does this impact, this dual policy impact? You have the center-periphery conflict in Myanmar. Simply put, the periphery of Myanmar is at war with the center. The center is dominated by the Bamars, and the periphery has ethnic minorities such as the Kachins, Shins, Shan, etc. So within this duality, you have the Chinese diaspora that has existed from historical times, like I mentioned. But you have an entry of a new identity, that is the Chinese entrepreneur, that's where the BRI comes in. So the Chinese entrepreneur is seen as someone who is mistrusted or someone who is extracting Myanmarese natural resources and going out. So you see that at these three levels, you have the amalgamation of different actors and the dual policy of China that is creating subverted identities. And that was the level of analysis that I tried to break down and put it quite simply. Now, keeping this framework in mind, I'll proceed towards an overview of what the BRI entails in Myanmar. So Myanmar joined BRI in 2017. It's part of two economic corridors. The first is the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar Economic Corridor. And the second is the China, Indo-China Peninsular Economic Corridor. It's part of these two largely because of its geography. I'll try and focus on CMEC, which is the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. And I want to highlight a certain aspect about CMEC. So the first thing is the timing of CMEC. When was it introduced to Myanmar and why did Myanmar choose to become a part of it? It was introduced to Myanmar when Myanmar was facing tough international scrutiny because of the Rohingya crisis. So it was being sanctioned left, right, center. And that's when China placed this on the table. What was different this time was that it was not a military government that was headed in Myanmar. It was the National League of Democracy that was headed by Aung San Suu Kyi in the face of a humanitarian rescue operator kind of a thing. And obviously she did sign the BRI for geographical, strategic, and historical interests, right? So therefore the timing is very crucial of when this was tabled by China. Second is, I've just highlighted a few important projects that come under CMEC. One is Yunnan province, linking Yunnan to Mandalay, which is Yunnan is in China and Mandalay is a very important economic region in Myanmar. Then you have the Yangon New City project and the Chokpu Special Economic Zone. The Chokpu Special Economic Zone is it's like a port construction that has a lot of strategic interests and different international players are also involved in it apart from China. But China is a leading player in that. I don't want to go into details about these projects because a lot of information is available online, but I do want to stress on two specific projects under CMEC to explain how BRI is actually functioning within Myanmar. And that's the Midzone project and the Lepidong Copper Mine project. Now, the Midzone project is actually a hydropower project that was suspended in 2011. It's part of Kachin state. And it was suspended because this was the first time you saw that the locals of the Kachin state, which is in the periphery of Myanmar, along with the central government that was against this project. And the military head, then military president of Myanmar, that is Thein Sein, he cancelled this project. it's still in limbo, and it kind of shows how there is a kind of widespread antipathy against China and its products, at least at the local level. The second is the Lepidong copper mine project, which is in Moniwa, Sagaing region of Myanmar. This was suspended in 2013, but interestingly, it was restarted in 2016. It's still widely being protested, and the project is operated by China's Wanbo Mining Limited. And it's actually one of the largest hydrometallurgy mines in Asia, if I'm right. Yeah. So what I want to highlight with these two projects is one started and one was stopped and restarted, and the other one is still stalled and is in limbo. What it showcases is the dualities of how these projects are conducted by China. The Chinese lobby is of course strong, but there appears to be a growing internal resistance as well. And another factor that I want to highlight when you're talking about BRI in Myanmar is the national debt that it has. And the national debt is a conversation that every Myanmarese will have when it is having a discussion on China or the BRI or China in general. So it has a total national debt of 10 billion, of which 40% it owes to China. So how then is the BRI being depicted? I think there's a slow progress. Firstly, it was proposed in 2017, and then an MOU was signed in 2018. So far, there have been 2 rounds of CMEC, one in Guangxi and Yunnan province in 2018 and 2019, respectively. And in fact, even Aung San Suu Kyi headed a committee. She established a committee, called the Steering Committee for the Implementation of BRI in Myanmar in order to push these projects further. However, one important point was to note that I think it was in 2019 where I think the Belt and Road Initiative took place in Beijing, and 30 projects were tabled in front of Aung San Suu Kyi as the early harvest program, but only 9 were approved by Myanmar, kind of showing how there is a lot of resistance and hesitation to take forward the BRI projects. Now, when I'm saying it's slow progress, I need to qualify how it is slow. So for that, I try and compare the CMEC with CPEC, which is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, to showcase how the CMEC is actually slower. So the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor has progressed really fast. And as soon as it was announced, Pakistan actually saw an increase of 240% in its FDI. And 17 projects were bought. We're bringing in tax revenues of up to, I think, 930 million in Pakistan. And when Prime Minister of Pakistan stepped into office, that is Imran Khan in 2018, he said that CPEC will get the utmost priority. I'm by no stretch of the imagination saying that all the projects are progressing smoothly in Pakistan. But if you look at the FDI and the kind of investments that are coming in terms of mega projects, I think in June of this year, 2 such projects were approved. One is a railway project and the other is a hydro project. Each set at around 7.2 billion and 6.2 billion respectively. Compared to that, you have Myanmar's investment figures, where there's not been a large influx of Chinese foreign direct investment. So in 2017-18 alone, CMEC was proposed. The approved investment by China was 1.395 billion. However, in just 12 months, the FDI dropped to 600 million. So what I'm trying to say is the numbers suggest that although China and Chinese companies are investing in Myanmar, the investment strategies get towards smaller projects and not mega infrastructure projects with which the BRI is usually associated with. And I think this is a very important marker that distinguishes Myanmar from other BRI recipient countries. So since the launch of CMEC, there's almost been no public announcement of mega infrastructure projects. They may come, but I think for the most part, they're not here yet. So why is it been slow? So one reason a lot of analysis talks about is the internal conflicts that plague Myanmar. Now, this is true. A lot of internal conflicts have derailed a lot of projects. Like the Muse Mandalay Railway project has been delayed for over 10 years. Actually, no, 15 years now. So, but my question is this. It never stopped China from investing in Myanmar before. So what has changed now? So the cost of conjecture, I propose that it has a lot to do with the institutional changes Myanmar is seeing. And these changes are forcing the government of Myanmar to heed to the antipathy of the local opinion. However, at the same time, I would think it would be naive to say that China's influence can be contested in Myanmar. But there is a growing anti-China sentiment that needs to be accounted for. So in conclusion, I just want to make 3 points. The first is the COVID-19 diplomacy that China is pursuing, and where does Myanmar feature in that, and what happens to those BRI projects in that respect. So there are a lot of companies that have invested in multiple projects in Myanmar, and they're using COVID-19 aid to push for their implementation. In fact, certain media reports emerged that in May of this year, when Xi Jinping called up Aung San Suu Kyi, he ensured that these projects get acceleration and are promoted further. And this was reiterated in his January visit in 2020 as well. Again, speaking on the dual policy of China, by dual policy, I mean that Beijing's policy and interests are contrary to those pursued by Yunnan. This is especially reflected in border smuggling, for instance, and the aid given to local militia. What it has done is it has eroded the trust of Myanmar's military, which is fighting rebels. And in some way, I think it is also reflective of the slow progress of the BRI projects. Hence, this dual policy, in my opinion, is eroding the traditional institutional trust that Myanmar has had towards China. And another important feature that I'd like to highlight is the generational unease with China. So within the military and also politicians, I think they did cooperate with China, but there was this uneasiness. However, I think the younger generation appears to be more open in showing its displeasure towards Beijing. How far this will reflect in policy is, of course, a big question, but it is important to note that such a sentiment exists. Ultimately, to put it in plain traditional IR theory terms, I think Myanmar is advocating a hedging strategy interspersed with bargaining when dealing with China, and this goes on for the BRI projects as well. So yeah, thank you.